Hello, everyone. My name is Lori Beth. Welcome to episode number 25 of Exploring Genuine Transformation. This is a show where I interview coaches and healers and thought leaders in all things transformational and on a range of topics. And this is a show that's really dedicated to exploring transformation for the sake of freedom, for the sake of more intimacy with yourself and life, with the sake of having more of you and having more of life, as opposed to getting all the things that you want in life, which sometimes is a byproduct of this more internally generated transformation. So today we are recording this and then uploading onto Facebook instead of doing it live, and because we were having some technology problems, but really wanting to get this show out today. I'm really excited to be interviewing Dr. Jessica Tartaro. So I'm going to introduce her and then we will get going. So hi, Jessica.
Hi, Lori.
Thanks for being here.
It's my pleasure.
Yeah. So Jessica is actually a dear friend and colleague, and I'm really excited to be interviewing her in the work that she does. The name of this episode is Helping Healers Thrive, and Jessica is a intimacy therapist and a connection facilitator. And I love the succinctness of that and that it expresses really what you do. Jessica's been really involved in the authentic world, the authentic relating world, and she also has a PhD in clinical psychology, yeah. And I just love the way that she is weaving that world with the world, I would say, of like this sort of deeper psychological and somatic and experiential kind of practices as well. And so, so Jessica leads a group that she started called Speak Up, and I have participated in it many, many times. And so I have also a sense of Jessica's work. And that's a group where she is, teaching these authentic relating games, and her other passion, which is sort of the same, all along the same lines, but is what is inherent in our title today, which is Helping Healers Thrive. And she is in the process of launching an 11-month program called The Healing Healers. And this is guiding and teaching and supporting healers and leaders in moving out of isolation and moving out of like, oh, I'm working so hard and I'm in burnout and not feeling filled up, to leading from a place of authenticity and hope, like wellness, and being able to use a lot of your, as a healer, as a leader, using the truth of your experience and the depth of your humanity to lead, so that so both that healers can be doing this with each other, but also in their leadership. So Jessica will say a lot more about that and as we go along, but I'm really excited for everyone to get a beautiful taste of her work today and her offering. Is there anything that you would add to that as the way of introduction? Anything you would say differently or?
No, and I want to appreciate you for languaging things that are hard to language. I'm inspired hearing you. If I wasn't running the program, I'd be interested. I mean, what I'm appreciating about you interviewing me, Lori, is that you have, as you said, come to my groups and gotten a living taste of my work. And then, of course, you yourself are a therapist. And there's this unique perspective that I believe culturally and socially therapists hold in our um, it's like the fabric of who we are as communities, that we as therapists hold this perspective, and you hold that with me. And it's other therapists that I want to have this dialogue with. So you and me talking today is part of the whole mission of us taking the time to lean in and go, wow, you see what I see. You sit in the rooms that I sit into. Let us close the gaps between these confidential little isolated pockets and start getting out loud together. And I don't mean talking about what we hold as confidential. That's not it. It's talking about what we are experiencing as humans, and then using each other to help us hold the enormity of what we hold. And then the bigger piece, and I'll just touch on this and we'll get to it a little more later, is using our relationship as fellow healers to help us tap into a much larger experience of being held. And that begins to get into a somewhat more spiritual viewpoint. But whether someone says they're spiritual or not, this idea of the universe is friendly and I'm not doing it alone, I believe that outlook is vital for us to walk the path of healer and not walk a burnout path. And I believe that us supporting each other helps us tap into that larger place of abundance and wellness and potency. So you and me talking today feels like we're talking about it and we're doing it at the same time.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for that addition. And also just, yeah, exactly. We're in it. I love that we're actually doing it. Like, it's not just, we're not just having a conversation about it. It makes me curious because a lot of, I'm imagining that a lot of people who are watching my show are not necessarily therapists. They might be coaches, or they might be kind of other healing practitioners. And so I would love to hear you say a little bit more about specifically kind of the connection that you feel with therapists and the way that therapists might be trained.
Well, I don't want to get too far into it because I don't only want other mental health therapists to be the ones responding to this. That would be its own program. Yeah. And you mentioned my program, the Healing Healers. And that program is for healers broadly construed. So I have a massage therapist. I have a yoga teacher. I have a meditation teacher. I have someone who works at the intersection of massage and aesthetics. I've got a Sufi teacher in the program. I have someone who does the dramatic arts. She's an actress. And it's really exciting to see that we're coming at the endeavor of healing through multiple doorways. But the thing we have in common is that we're interested in the real thing, like this program, what the internal transformation work makes available. That's what we have in common, walking through multiple doors. That said, my training was and is in professional psychology, or I should say I started in professional psychology. One thing I was playing with this morning, because I'm constantly exploring how to language this, is my doorway or my entry into the healing arts was through the mind. So I was an academic. I was one of those students and scholars who did well, performed well at the tops of all of my classes. And so all my mentors directed me to do what? Max out in the system of learning to get a PhD. So I did I followed that course. Oh, you're smart? Go get a PhD. Like, it was like, there was no sort of, you're smart. Maybe you need to balance out your smarts by doing anything else but intellectualizing, but not in that world. The brain is God in that world. And I have a bright one. And so I joke that I graduated the 27th grade in 2019, but I was in school for my entire life. And I was in my mid-30s when I finished. So my doorway to, broadly speaking, the healing arts was through the mind. And that far into being a scholar, at a certain point I looked around and I went, I'm not healthy. I'm not well. Like, I haven't breathed into my body in a full deep breath in what feels like years. It is not an easy system to get through academia and to cross that dissertation defense and say, I've defended myself successfully. I mean, just the name, I am defending myself. You know, it's not a friendly system, even though I was lucky that my mentors, by and large, were very supportive. But I was still proving myself constantly under scrutiny. Okay, so I got my PhD, looked around and said, there's more. If I'm really interested in being a human, helping other humans, this human has to get well. And so what I started doing was dancing. I remember I got my postdoctoral psychologist position. My first job was at the VA mental health clinic in Austin, Texas. And I biked to and from work every day. And then in every free minute I had, which wasn't that many because it was a very demanding job, I danced. And lucky for me, I was in one of the kind of epicenters of conscious community dance in the country, in Austin. Go Austin. And so I started dancing my way and biking my way and back to my body. And here I am a decade later. And what I believe is very unique about my offering is that I am bringing a large piece of work that's about embodiment in concert with bringing scholarship, in concert with bringing a whole bunch that I found in the interim. So one affinity, to kind of to your question, that I have for other mental health therapists is an appreciation of most of us got trained through the system that prioritizes the mind, that elevates the mind. And I am grateful every day for the quickness of my mind. But I'm also well aware that that's not all there is. And in fact, if I'm very interested in specifically trauma recovery, I mean, not being in the sort of frozen dysfunction that most of us have living somewhere in our bodies, that it must be about dropping into the body. So that's, both an affinity I have for people who share my degree, but also a hope that I can invite a walk into the body along with me.
Mm-hmm. It's great to hear your story. That was going to be one of my questions, is sort of your personal story into this kind of work. And I'm wondering if you do have anything to add to that with the specific program that you're offering now. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I write about this in my website. So I am trained in multiple systems. I have a PhD in clinical psychology, as you mentioned. I'm trained as an authentic relating facilitator, and I'm trained as a circler. These both are styles of what's called a relational meditation. So it's a focus on relationship as the point of wake up. I'm trained as an intimacy coach and a sexuality educator. I'm trained in multiple systems. But one thing I have found across all these systems is a tendency. This is not 100% true, but I would say the norm is to say one thing as a facilitator of healing and to practice another.
Yeah.
I just saw that breakdown constantly. And it was so normal that I thought, well, this is just how it is. Mm-hmm. And that I go home and I stay up long hours working, or there's so many examples. I kind of capitalize on my power, but don't necessarily kind of practice what I preach. Mm-hmm. But then I go present a face to the world that's different. And I spend a lot of time being angry. And what I realize now is this is actually not the fault of any individual, but it's the design of systems that just don't hold the healer's healing as anywhere essential or a priority. And I think we're wrong. And I think it seems to me that what we're breeding in our attempt to create helpers is just more dysfunction. But this is in the design of the system. So if I go back to, okay, so we're all products of the system. We have to be products of a different system in order to help the products of the current system. So to me, that's what the Healing Healers is the different system, which says healers gathering together are an essential step, because the ones who get us are our counterparts. How in the world do we heal if we are not being held? How do we hold others without being held? How do we nurture without being nurtured? We're running on fumes, or we're coming from the mind. Mm-hmm. But if I'm actually held, then I don't have to effort to hold others. It's just going to come right through me, from my back body to my front body. Mm-hmm. You see? Mm-hmm. As opposed to, and this is an embodiment principle, but it's like if I'm actually leaning, so I'm leaning forward now, like towards you in the phone. But if I lean back, my body starts feeling actually right now different. There's a little less strain in my lower back. Yeah. I take a clearer breath. Yeah. Oh, I like your little neck move there. Yeah. So it even does something in the space between us if I do that. So if I see, and I'm in my therapy office right now. So over there, if I point over there, that's where my clients sit. So if I actually see my clients not from leaning in from my front body, but leaning back from my back body, then there's less expenditure and more ease. Then there's less effort or muscular kind of doing and more surrender. And that's a sustainable model. And what I'm really invested in is healers sustaining. I said this in a talk I gave yesterday, but I feel really privileged that I get to say it again and to you and through your program, which is I'm invested in healers taking a much more active leadership role in the shaping of the world as we know it, as in shaping of policy, as in shaping of the kind of containers that hold communities, as in shaping of resistance movements. I've seen a lot of resistance movements run by people who don't hold the kind of insight that, by and large, I believe healers and therapists hold, which is really sophisticated psychological insight, hard won from hundreds and thousands of hours of sitting with humans and listening patiently to stories and going, wow, here's the themes in common. And I think we have more to offer than we are activating, and we're too tired to get involved. But I think if we get more sustained, we can step out more, and our mentees can step out more. Our lineage can then start impacting the world. That's what I'm interested in.
Beautiful. Yeah, it gives me this image of, even with what we just both did by backing up, right? That it's starting with the individual, right? It's like, okay, if I can relax back and feel held, and then I can feel held in this relationship, let's say, both as a therapist and a coach, or I can feel held in that relationship, where I can feel held as a client, right? And then the trickling out, oh, I'm being held by other healers, other practitioners. It's like all of that. Then what I hear you saying is it's like we start with the individual and in our individual relationships, and we create that transparency between our, lives as healers and our personal lives. Then that can start, and within community, obviously larger community, then that can start to trickle out. And we have the energy, we have the balance, we have, we feel, like you said, we feel held, we feel supported. And so there's enough energy, and potentially enough time would be another one, right? To, and resource to then be able to say, oh, I feel so resourced in me that I have even I'm even thinking of yes, for bigger movements, but even oh, I'm walking down the street and here's this human in front of me who doesn't look well, and I actually can then have time and space to really connect with them and make a difference in that way, and feel that kind of mutual, connection there. So
that's a beautiful last piece that you added. Then there's it's not just what we're doing in this professional path, in these one-on-one high dollar spaces where some of us work, it can seem exclusive, but actually it's the human to human connection that becomes possible. We're available. I will, I am the person who needs this program. I mean, let me raise my hand and admit I struggle so much with taking on too much, getting very busy. I don't have time to talk to my friends, or if I do, it's late at night, or see my partner. We're squeezing in our social time because I'm a very busy person. I'm a very boring person, and I get myself tangled into this mindset. I just passed a guy on my way over here who was standing in front of the co-op and holding a sign. And it's like I passed a human. I mean, I'm not necessarily one way or another saying we should always stop for everyone who's standing on the street with a sign, but just to be able to let the world impact me and be present to it. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about such a basic way of being more present to the world, and that has my fingers and toes tingling.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's, I I actually love that that came out of me in that way, or that we're in this conversation, like that it's moving through both of us, because it's giving me also the, you know, I think we often, so many of us, I know I feel this, feel like kind of helpless, like, oh, the world is so big and there's so much going on, and you know, there's so much pain and there's so much suffering in the world, and there's so many things that I, you know, it's like can't even, it's so hard to connect with all of that. And something about this conversation is like, oh, I feel a breath come through that's like, oh, it actually is possible to make a difference. You know, it is possible to connect with, you know, to not have to feel that kind of overwhelm. And I do think it starts with us really resourcing and taking care of ourselves, and then in our communities and whatnot. The vision that you have. Yeah. I had another thought when you were talking too, which is I work with a coach, and she often talks about what your core message is the medicine that you need to give yourself. And it's usually like the life theme, you know, it's like the thing that you've been working with your whole life. And so and this is what I see you doing, so this is why I wanted to bring it up. But, you know, as you, like, it's like you engage that medicine, you're constantly engaging that medicine inside of you. And then as you know, begin to put it out in the world in all the different ways that you do, then you're like re-engaging it in you again. But the beauty of that, which I really like the concept, is that it both keeps us honest to our work, you know, and to what we're offering, but that also, like, again, it brings together like it brings us into connection with the people that we work with. We're not separate. You know, it's not like, oh, I'm offering this thing that has no relevancy to my own, you know, path or my own journey, but actually I'm offering this thing that, you know, is the thing that ties us together. And I can bring this up in the work that I'm doing with you, you know, like, you know, whether it's a group or whether it's an individual client, it's like, oh yeah, I get that, you know, and we can be in this together, and that because it is the medicine that we're engaging in personally, we keep being able to offer it even more powerfully, you know, as we do the inner work. So
beautiful, precisely. I think this is also, you were referencing therapists. I think this is missing, particularly in mental health therapy, in the kind of norms of that culture. I have a hunch it's missing across the board in forms of healing, and I'm sure it's missing in medicine. But this idea of, I am of the substance that I am serving. You know, and this is where there's sort of political underpinnings, I think, of this program. I've done a fair amount of work in social justice activism, and it feels imperative that any of us paying attention are looking at systems of power and marginalization around our work. So I do. And one of the things I think has happened in the healing arts, kind of just held as like a tradition that's age old, is kind of getting ravaged by capitalism, as if I'm commodified. So I'm just a dispensing machine for medicine. I'm a dispensing machine for wellness or stress reduction, rather than, as I said, I am of the substance that I am serving. Village healer is a way of calling kind of the opposite of the idea of like the commodified healer. So what I've been practicing, as I said, was trained as a professional psychologist, which is a fairly bounded kind of professional norm. I am doctor and you are patient. I am expert, you are non-expert, right? There's division, and that has its place. What I found, just in terms of my calling, I'm not necessarily at all saying there's anything wrong or bad. I have a great amount of gratitude to professional psychologists. I got so much from my training. But what I found in my calling is that I've become less and less interested in maintaining those bounds, and more interested in finding skillful, sustainable ways to, and you said it really nicely, I'll paraphrase, but relate, essentially, join in the humanity with my clients. Now, professional psychology does a wonderful job of teaching us ethics. And ethics, by and large, are about boundaries. right? We don't share certain things. It's called disclosure. There's a word for it, to disclose, right? There's even a word for getting human with our clients. Like it's like a thing, a special kind of, exception. So it's good and right to not use our time with our clients to do our own work per se.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you think of the therapist, and I actually did have a therapist once. I would go to her for sessions, and it was like she would be like, "Oh, you think you have it rough? Let me tell you about me." And I was like, "I don't know. I don't think this is working out."
Wow. Wow.
But the opposite extreme is someone who goes, "That must be hard. Tell me more." Right? There's sympathy versus empathy, right? So, very often, I don't know if you've found this to be true, but very often I find the clients who come to see me are working through things I'm working through almost in real time, or at least recently. So they come to my session, sit on my couch, and in my mind, I go, yeah, I get that. I mean, last night I was working on that one.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a choice point there. I can listen as if I'm hearing it for the first time. Ooh, sorry about that. There we go. Or I can, turn it around and make it about me. But the thing in the middle, which is what I actively practice, is being able to create the bridge that says, I'm with you. I am holding a ton of attention and compassion for your experience. I am being impacted by it. And I'm going to also create some transparency so that in this process, you also feel me, my humanity. So I think I was working with a couple yesterday, and I was talking about how when we get healthier, the grief will come, or the anger will come. Certain emotions that weren't safe will begin to flow. And that can look like we're going backwards. But I was making the point to them, because they've been doing some very beautiful work, that it's because they're creating more safety for each other that they're able to kind of be mad. Like, last 20 years, I'm mad. It was coming online. So I said, this is something to celebrate. And I said, I remember when I began to do some healing with my dad. And I just gave a short anecdote. And I said, I had my dad was really tough on us, but when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he got really sweet. And I remember around that time how much I couldn't stop crying. And it was like the sweet father I'd always yearned for became available to me. I said, it's a sign of expansion and healing. So I just gave a little anecdote. And I saw especially one of the couple look at me and go, huh?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There's something about it. And I've had clients say to me, I had one client say to me recently, he said, someone with an addiction history, he said, I've always hid from my therapist. He said, but I've never hid anything from you.
Wow, beautiful.
And we were at the end of the session, so I didn't have the time to say to him, why do you think that is? But now I'm just speculating. It doesn't come from his mouth. My guess is because I wasn't hiding from him either.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm interested in being able to say to my clients, one, I'm human, but here's the other piece that's not small. And two, I'm not ashamed. One, I'm human. And two, I'm not saying I'm terrible. Oh God, I'm going to join you in being terrible. I'm saying I'm human, and look how much there is to celebrate. That's the permission. I think one of the biggest things we can do for our clients, and this is really the only way we do this is if we get authentic, is we say, there was never anything wrong with you anyway.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then when that floods in, suddenly humans who were paralyzed become resilient. Mm-hmm. Because we all have this innate creativity and this innate kind of spring back, right? Resilience. Think about a ball that bounces. We have it innately, but it will never free up under shame. But if we can, as therapists, because we have a very big influence as therapists, don't we? I mean, I go to my therapist and I go to her and I go, help. And she helps me. But she's helping me in the way she walks in the world as much as the way she talks. So as a therapist, I have all this responsibility. If I can say to my clients, there was never anything wrong with you anyway, and a bunch of us can do that. And a bunch of people who seek out therapists can go, oh my God, I can find my power. Not because I went through years and years and years of high dollar therapy, but because I got a deep transmission from one healthy human to another healing human. Then I think our world begins to change. That's where the revolution comes in.
Yeah. Well, I love also that you're referencing shame, because, and that piece of it, right? Because that's the isolation that I think like all humans can feel. And shame is one of the hardest emotions. And it really is the emotion of like, there's something wrong with me because I've experienced this, because I'm feeling this, because, you know, I have all of this happening. And so I think that, like, to me, that also speaks to when we're not sharing our humanity, then it can feel, we can be replicating that kind of isolation and that shame. Like, oh, you're having this experience over here. I know nothing about that, right? So that's a really beautiful thing. And I was also thinking as you were speaking, because you started, you know, you've been referencing therapists, and obviously both you and I are in the coaching world as well. So we're sort of I mean, we're, you know, I think this is one of the reasons that I have been shifting over to coaching, is because it feels like it does, the positive of that is that it gives a lot of permission to be able to be human and to, you know, like be friends with your clients in a certain way. I mean, maybe, you know, with those boundaries, right? But then obviously on the side of coaching, there can be a question of, you know, there's not, people aren't trained in ethics or in certain kind of boundaries, and also certain kind of deeper, you know, at times deeper attachment and sort of relational and trauma work, right? And so, you know, it's both sides of it. And you were really speaking to the therapy side of it, right? Is because we do get that training, but then sometimes there's not the permission to be human, you know, and to be, to really bring who we are. And I love how you described, like you did such a, I mean, it was great that you used an example, and just, I love how you described that intersection, you know, in the moment, like, okay, if, because there has to be, why am I sharing, right? Like, what is the purpose? What is this in service of? There has to be that question. You know, I'm not that I'm just sharing to kind of offload something. And so it's this balance, you know, this intricate balancing act, which is so important. And then, you know, one thing that you didn't speak to, which I know that is part of you, because I have, you know, obviously been in your classes that you've led and whatnot, is also just all those places where we're just off the cuff humans, you know, like humor coming in, or like, you know, sort of having that moment of contact that, you know, which I think therapists can also do. And I don't feel like I was shut down to that as a therapist, but you may have felt that in your training. But still, just the importance of even just those small moments of shared humanity that I think also creates a lot of, you know, like back to this theme, it's like, oh, then I feel like connected, and I feel, you know, less alone. I feel more able to be human. Really, that's what we're talking about. How do we be human? How do we be human, like in the full spectrum, you know, and range of being human?
Absolutely. You know, the thing that we like, oftentimes we talk about sharing humanity is like sharing struggles, but there's also the sharing delight, you know, sharing inspiration, sharing turn on, sharing, you know, whatever, an offbeat sense of humor. One of the things that I was working on this morning as I was working on my programming and my curriculum for my program next year, this is a slightly different direction, so bear with me. But there's so many different forms that group healing can take. And I will say that it's not that my psychology program, my PhD program per se shut me down. It certainly was never, you know, be very serious all the time. It's not like there was any sort of overt, you know, it was just a system of high pressure. And the natural consequence of a system that's high pressure is to be weighed down under the load. I mean, it was stressful, and the stress took a toll. And so when there's more stress coming in than there is play coming in, we're a lot less likely to be generous and improvisational and so on. I mean, to improvise at all, we have to be present. But if I'm constantly calculating how many minutes there are in a day to get all of my work done, I'm really never there. So I've been playing with taking this group that I'm running, and it's a cohort of 12 plus my program director and myself, so it's a full cohort of 14, exploring a practice that's called ritual theater, which is really, it's embodied, and it's about play, and it's about improvisation, and it's about getting in the service of healing without going through our linear mind, but going through our kind of play bodies. And so imagine, I mean, there's lots of ways of calling this kind of drama therapy is something close. Family constellations is similar. What was the other one we were talking about today? Playback theater. So there's a couple different ways of calling it, but I, through some of my dance training, through a 5 rhythms teacher, encountered this idea of ritual theater, where just imagine I take a scene, like the scene of me and my relationship with my father, but I play maybe my father, and someone else plays me, and then someone else plays maybe my siblings, and someone else plays my father's father, who had a very big influence on him. And we begin to listen in a way where the creative mind and the creative body can come together, and we start moving. And then there's a director to the scene. This is how it worked, where our dance teacher was the director, and we all played these parts, and we kind of, she would say, try this movement and do it repetitively. Try saying this. Okay, now let it go. Let the scene just play out. Okay, now we're going to swap out roles. Now I'm going to play me, you know, and then someone else who played my father is going to play my sibling. But thinking about, it's not just sharing humanity in the space where there's struggle. It's like sharing humanity in the space where there's like wild creativity. Like that's what I'm interested in, because then we expand a much fuller range, and then we can come and meet our clients and then walk the gentle steps where we go into, oh, your humor body. Wow, you haven't been able to feel your humor body because you've been on the, you know, brink of disaster for years. But as you settle in and you start getting permission to get healthier, then we can find not just survival, but what is this call about? Thriving, right? Thriving. Well, for our clients to thrive, it's just a no-brainer. We have to be thriving.
Yeah. Well, I love that you're bringing this in, because like the other, you know, we've been talking about, let's say, like doing the healing work or the trauma work, right? But the other side of that is, and what's that even in service of, right? It's to be able to experience more celebration, more play, more flow, more creativity. So it seems, I love kind of the balancing of that like to have healers be healthy, we need to be, you know, we need to be working in all of these ways. Right. We need to be bringing joy and celebration, as well as being, you know, being seen in our shame, or being, you know, witnessed in all of who we are. And I just want to say, like, I think, as someone who's known you, well, I would say, I really think that you do an amazing job of, both as a friend and as, you know, someone who's supporting others, whether, you know, whether they're healers or not, but, you know, in supporting that kind of celebration, and in lifting, you know, the people up around you to really see their strengths and their gifts, and to be able to share leadership in a certain way, you know, wanting, like, oh, I see everybody, and I want to bring that out of them, which I think is another way, right, of talking about, like, what, you know, this idea, not the idea, but, you know, it's another way of supporting healers to thrive, right? It's like being in connection and community versus, like, not only isolation, but competition. And, you know, like, so I think you particularly, I mean, I've learned a lot from you, and from watching you, and watching you really help other leaders rise and thrive and see their, you know, unique gifts, and then be able to offer them. So I think that's a huge part. I'm sure that will be a huge part of your program. And I also think that that's a huge way that we're gonna, you know, like this model that you're creating, right? Like that's a huge way that it's gonna, that it is gonna basically help healers to feel whole, and to feel supported and resourced, and help our world, you know, as we've been talking about.
Thank you so much. I feel very touched that you can reflect not just about my professional offerings, but how I walk in the world. That's my great hope. I mean, that is my great hope, to close that divide between, the walk and the talk. And I really diligently seek out my own healing. And that is something that I think feels fairly unique, is that I don't see a lot of practitioners necessarily tending to their own health. Mm-hmm. And that I in some ways I feel grateful that I had kind of a rough start in life, because it seemed not that optional to me, like to sort of be upright. I really needed to seek out a lot of help. Mm-hmm. But what that's done is really kept my own healing foremost. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like I have kept humility. Mm-hmm. And humility is a big gift, because it connects me to other people. I'm acutely aware that I have a lot of cracks in my system that need regular love, so that I can be, I don't know what whole really means per se, but that I can love all the parts. And that really has me be generous, rather than sort of, you and I were personally talking about this the other day, where I have my part that gets really arrogant, and I have my part that gets really righteous. But it's when I'm actually connected to my own humility, not a false humility, not like I'm a martyr, and that's the thing I want to change. But just like, yep, I don't have all the answers. I sure have a lot of skills. I sure have a lot to offer, but I don't have all the answers. And that's where a certain generosity comes, that I think allows that kind of congruence that I feel grateful to be appreciated for.
Yay. Yeah, it makes me, I love the last part. Thank you. I'm taking in I'm glad that I feel I feel you feeling appreciated, and that feels really good as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what, something that you just said about really kind of also like knowing your own cracks. And I think this does relate to the topic as well of, that healing healers were never fully healed. Like nobody is fully healed. I've been thinking about this a lot in terms of my my program that just the work that I'm doing with the dark feminine, because it's like, there's, we can keep going into the trauma and the somatic work and, and keep releasing this and learn how to, open to energy in the body as that, right? Or we can bring in more celebration and fun, and that, it's a constant journey. It's not something that just, you do. It's like, I did this deep healing and now it's done. So I think you just really spoke to that as well, that it seems like the more that we can learn also to accept ourselves as we are now, and learn different ways, like exactly what you said. It's like, wow, I have this crack here, and I know that I need this, and I know that I need to go be with some girlfriends right now, because that's going to be really supportive to me. It's actually more about learning ourselves, knowing ourselves, that's such a big piece of being resourced and feeling held. So
yes. Beautiful. Someone who was doing copy editing for me when I was coming up with this program said, why don't you call it the healed healers? And I was like, no, there's a really good reason why. The one piece I want to add there too, kind of inspired by your share, is in my program, one of the 6 modules. So every other month we meet for an in-person 3-day immersion. Mm-hmm. And the 4th module is called Learning to Receive the Advanced Yoga Pose. Learning to Receive the Advanced Yoga Pose. I did an interview recently with someone who's considering the program, and she just flat out said to me, I'm terrible at receiving. And I was like, girlfriend, you're not alone. That this muscle of receiving, I have never met anyone who's really skilled at it, but therapists and healers and the givers, like the professional givers, are exceptionally unskilled at it. It's so much easier to focus on someone else. It's so much easier. And as soon as the attention comes at the people who are so skilled at giving attention, I mean, I've certainly known this to be true historically for me, a little less currently, there's suddenly I didn't do anything. Thank you so much for your help. Oh, it wasn't me, it was you. I mean, I've gotten really mindful about saying you're welcome when a client says thank you, because I feel that I do such a disservice if I can't at the very least receive their gratitude. So it has really, I've committed to a practice of practicing, not just receiving, but asking. And from coming to my classes that I teach this. I have focused multiple weekly connection games sessions on being able to ask for help. One of the things and I'm proud to be able to say this on a recorded interview, is that this past winter, a year ago, I went through a particularly tough time in my life. And it was really through your support that I had the courage to ask a group of girlfriends who live in my town, who are trusted allies, would you hold me? I would like to call a healing circle for myself. And at that point, I'd not seen that being done in our community of friends. Would you gather and hold me? Not at a level of like, I need you all to be professionals, but just, would you be a human with me? Because I need to be held and I am not well. And you did. And you were there, and several others. It was a small circle, and it was transformative. And I feel delighted that since I called that for a circle, half a dozen other women have called circles in town. And, their story is theirs, certainly no names named. It's their own process. But the fact of their circles followed, and I was able to attend some of them, not all of them, and just be a human to a human. And in the practice of that, be able to, oops, my battery's low. In the practice of that, be able to practice my muscle of receiving, and then be able to be in the reciprocity of giving, and let it just be that, right? Someone could sit or lay in the middle and just be loved up. We could talk, we could sing, we could sound, we could be in silence. So I know is a muscle that, think about it, any muscle that's weak, it takes flexing, right? It's flaccid until any tone is toned by practice. So that is one thing that I specifically want to help my counterparts work on is, your turn. And it's one thing to receive from the sort of divine, like to receive and say, I have a prayer practice and I have a meditation practice and I feel held at a spiritual level. It's another thing to receive literally someone's embrace and not squirm. And then be held past that place where my body is rigid and then really be able to soften. I think it's the human to human connection piece that we have a lot of learning to do about, just like at large as a culture. That's the authenticity piece. That's why authentic relating is really a radical practice. Authentic relating, or AR, and anyone can look that up online. It's in many major cities across the United States and also in Europe, and it's a growing movement. I think it's really a radical practice of learning how to actually be out loud and transparent. And then what I'm doing is bringing authenticity specifically to healers, being with other healers in more authentic ways, particularly learning how to ask for and receive support.
Beautiful. I just want to stress kind of 2 points that came out of that for me. That is also part of, obviously part of your program, but also part of this theme of the healing healers or helping healers to thrive, which is like the practice of receiving is so nourishing when one can actually take it in, even though it might be, we all have different challenges around that, and how resourced and how held, you can feel from that. And then the other piece that I think is so important is the piece around touch, that can we, and obviously for some people touch isn't as comfortable because of the way that we're conditioned and whatnot, but potentially opening to that, or if you are a person that actually, wow, that just helps my body completely relax. And I know that I personally feel that so much because I can do such deep healing work alone, and yet or just do my own work alone, or just be with myself. And then being in contact with somebody else or having somebody hold me with no words, even for 5 minutes, can be like profoundly shifting of my entire nervous system, my entire being. So I'm just wanted to stress that because I don't know the specifics of your program, though I'm very inspired by it, and but I'm sure that all of these pieces are part of your program, the pieces that we've been naming. Yeah.
We are. And before we close.
Yeah. Do you want to, I mean, it seems like a good place to probably close. So do you want to talk a little bit about your program and
Absolutely.
yeah, and let people know
perfect.
how they can, find you. And also when I post this video, we can post a link to to the program description and everything.
Perfect. Great. So the Healing Healers Journey is an 11-month program, and I've attended a lot of weekend immersions where I've got to squeeze in my training and then come back to work on Monday all tired. It's not that. It's an every other month, 3-day, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday immersion in the beautiful woods of Quilcene, Washington, here in the Pacific Northwest. In between the 3-day immersions, we're going to do virtual work. I have a beautiful lineup of guest teachers, and we have 6 modules. So it's February of 2020 all the way through December. We get to be on an extended journey together, which has me really excited because, as you and I well know, these kind of conditioned learnings take time to unlearn. So we're going to be spending some time together. The program is half full, and I'm looking for kind of the brave, embodied healers who are wanting to change systems. And that is, not for everyone, but for the people whose torch is lit and want to get more fire around them, want to get more support, want to get more practice, want to get allyship. And it is true that one of the things that I have been cultivating is my ability to kind of quicken the flame of fellow leaders and healers. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're going to be doing together. So we're redesigning models of leadership. We're celebrating our mythology, that where our origin started, the crack through which the light comes through, as Leonard Cohen says. We're doing work around being able to celebrate whatever wounds wrought us, wrought and brought us into our profession. Mm-hmm. Then we're practicing authentic relating and authentic leadership. So inside of my program, the participants will get trained to become authentic relating facilitators. And my sense is authentic relating games have infinite applications. So that is one of the skill sets that will be included. And then, as I said, we're going to be practicing the art of receiving. We're going to be practicing what it means to actually be seeking our own intimacy as healers. So I felt it was important as an intimacy therapist that I have a module on intimacy for therapists and healers, intimacy for the practitioners of people who spend so much time giving. What does our own path of intimacy look like? Mm-hmm. The program concludes with every participant doing a teaching, and doing a teaching from an embodied space and place. So being able to kind of culminate the program with each person getting to lead all the other participants. So we're doing some deep allyship, and I'm calling forward I'm actually doing a talk in Seattle this Saturday, and it's called Calling the Sacred Rebel Healers. I'm calling the others who, like me, want to change the system, which is an act of rebellion, to be in touch with me. You can email me. You can PM me on Facebook. You can, what are the other options? Certainly read my website. So all of those are welcome. And you can come to my talk in Seattle. So if anyone watching this is in Seattle, I'm speaking on Saturday, Solstice Saturday at 2 p.m. at the Sacred Embodiment Community. And I'll go ahead and add that event link under this post as well.
Yeah. And that sounds, very thorough and very amazing. I just want to add, I have actually witnessed in the last year, Jessica mentor several different, people in our community. And so I think, obviously such an added bonus of everything that you just named, and working with you is like really bringing out leaders, specific skill sets and gifts and their true authenticity. And, I've actually, some of the people that that have done some of your courses, like they're doing really incredible things in the world. And it really was, you said putting the fire under, kind of like, I don't know how you said it, but the fire, the spark, like it really, that is one of your gifts is bringing that forth. So I'm just giving it another plug in terms of being able to, in terms of working with Jessica in this kind of intimate container, over time. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure having you. Yeah, I love having this conversation. There's so many other conversations I want to have with you on
I
all of these
do.
topics.
It really is a pleasure to talk with someone who cares as deeply as you do about transformation. I have to say, you know what it is to be able to reflect back the kind of things that just quicken the flame, is the thing I said. And I feel my own kind of flame of excitement quicken by being mirrored by you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you
Well,
so much.
yeah, so, So again, for all those watching, my name is Lori Beth, and I'm actually in the process of launching a new program, which I'm really excited about. I just did a preliminary announcement today on Facebook, and it's called Dark Feminine Alchemy, and it is a program that I'm working with female leaders and entrepreneurs and coaches and whatnot to harness their darkness and traumas and struggles and transform them into your true power and passion and pleasure and purpose. But I actually really like to use the word success, because whatever success is for each person. And so I'm starting, some of that information is gonna, I'll be posting more about that program. And it's going to mostly be one-on-one, and there's going to be an optional group that everybody in it can be a part of, probably a couple times a week. So if you're interested in my program, then please reach out to me. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Jessica.
My pleasure. Thank you, Lori.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. How do I stop?